Hello and welcome back to my craft room. It's Saturday night. It's been a long day at work today, but I've had my dinner. I'm all relaxed and chilled, and it's time for some slow-so boho. Time to do pennant number 3 in my boho bunting. Here are the first two. I'm really pleased with how they've turned out so far. I've been inspired by the scrap bags I got from Bazaar, which I will leave a link to below, and if you want to see the previous videos, I'll put them all in the boho bunting playlist on my channel. So let's have a look at what I've got ready for this week's pennant. So I've gone, the first one was kind of pinks and greens and cream. The next one slightly more vivid pink and green with that huge splash of yellow. I thought I'd ring the changes again this week and go with this kind of beautiful teal greeny blue, and this purple that's got that sort of teal colour in the print. Possibly just a little splash of this colour. So all of these three fabrics are silks from the scrap bags, from the Bazaar scrap bags. This is fabric, this is from an old shirt of my husband's, which I'm going to use as the backing piece. And then I've also got some of the trims and things that were included in the scrap bags. This little pom-pom was in the scrap bag. This bead is from my jar of wooden beads. These were in the scrap bags, and this was in the scrap bags. This week I've decided I want to do a triangular pennant, and I'm going to have a go at making a homemade tassel on the bottom. And there are so many different ways to make tassels. I'm going to keep this first one really simple and straightforward, and I would quite like to start using, I've been keeping this little Orts jar, O-R-T-S, Orts. I think years ago it was the name for little scraps and leftovers of anything, food or whatever. But it's come to be known as the leftover snippets of thread and things. By people who do embroidery and such like. For me, it's my tiny little scraps that are too small to do anything else with, but I don't really want to throw away. Actually, do you know, I'm going to put this larger piece away, and I'm just going to have this little snippet of this. And I want to use these bits and bobs to make my tassel, along with some embroidery threads and stuff that I've got. So, as always, I've got my lovely little bag that my friend Avril made me, with all of my slow stitching kit inside. So this little cute purse has got the scissors and needle threaders and things. I've got some sharp scissors here. I've got my seam roller that I just bought myself last week, some cotton threads, some embroidery floss, and lots of vintage sewing threads, machine threads actually. Lots of those, which I want to use up on this project. So everything I need is here. Let's take these pieces out. And what I've done for myself, if you've seen previous videos, you will already know this. If you haven't and you want to catch up, just check out the playlist. What I've given myself is this basic recipe, little recipe book. So sorry about the squeaky noise. That's my little swivel chair that I have in my workroom. I think it's complaining because of all the extra pounds I gained over Christmas. Anyway, so to get myself going each week, I've got this basic recipe. So each week I will pick one of these pennant shapes, one of these applique shapes, and then follow 5 basic steps. None of this is written in stone. If I want to break the rules, I absolutely can. It's just to get me going if I'm stuck, you know, just to give me a starting point. So this week I've already decided the first that was last week. The first week was this shape. I've already decided that this week I want to do a triangle, and I'm going to use a circle for my applique shape. Now that's far too big, but these are just guidelines. So last week I also used a circle, but this was a kind of pre-made decorative applique piece with a kind of spiral of cord couched onto a basic circle of fabric. That was actually a little bit bigger than my template. This week my applique piece is going to be smaller than this. Where have I put it? Here it is. So this is one of the little pieces that came in the scrap bags. So the scrap bags from Bazaar are made up of reclaimed fabrics from recycled clothing, factory waste and that kind of thing in India. And there were also a lot of bits and bobs. So I'm hoping to use some of these this week to make my tassels. So things like these ribbons and trims, this little pom-pom and these beads I'm hoping to use this week. So this is going to be my circle shape, and that's the size of that circle fits quite well with that triangle. It balances pretty well. First thing is to cut my basic shape. I'm going to cut my basic shape out of the backing fabric. So this time I'm using this stripy, kind of lilac-y stripe fabric from my husband's shirt. Okay, so I've put my pennant template, my triangular template, onto that backing fabric, and I'm just roughly drawing around it. Okay, I'm going to cut that shape out. The next step, so I've cut my pennant shape, and the next bit is to divide it into 1, 2, 3 or 4. Most of the time I think I'm just going to divide into 2 or 3 or just leave it whole. This is quite a small shape. I don't want to be getting too fiddly, so I'm just going to cut it into 2 straight down the middle, I think. And let's have a little play with that idea. No need to be too precise, unless you want to be, which I don't. So I'm just going to draw a line down there. It's not showing very well. Let's draw it again, because I'm going to be stitching up to this line, so I want to be able to see it. And then I just want to cut a piece that will cover this whole area. So now I need some pins. I'm going to turn this over because I want to be able to see this line to stitch along, so I'm going to turn that over. I'm going to pin this fabric on here, and I'm going to pin it on in such a way that it covers the whole of that area. And it's a bit skimpy here. I've actually not left myself very much to play with, so that's a bit of a boo-boo, but I think I can work around it. And if not, I'll just patch a bit, it doesn't matter. This is very much totally making it up as I go along. There we go. So in a minute, when I stitch along this line that I've drawn, I would just about catch the fabric in. You can see I've left it a little bit, cut it a little bit fine there. And it's cut a little bit fine here, but that's fine. It's okay. It's okay. If it was sort of much shorter, like up to here, there might be a bit of an issue and I might have to patch a bit, but I think we'll be fine. So I'm now going to run a little running stitch along this line that I've drawn. So I'll come back and show you when that's all done. I'm just coming to the end of this stitching line now. I've just done a little neat-ish running stitch. Doesn't need to be anything more elaborate. It doesn't need to be particularly strong because I don't think this seam is going to get any particular kind of stress on it. I'm using these lovely, I've got quite a lot of these vintage spools of thread. They break a little bit from time to time, but these kind of a project like this, it gives me the chance to use up these little bits of vintage threads, and then when they're all done I can make something lovely with the spools. Okay, so I have stitched all along that line that I drew down the centre of the triangle. You can see it's not particularly neat. It doesn't need to be. It's absolutely fine. I'm going to take my pins out, and I don't want to cut into my base fabric, but I can cut off the excess of this decorative printed silk. I'm a bit torn whether this is too big or not to go into the orts jar. I might wait and see and use it in the tassel. So you can don't need too many, 2 or 3 will do. So I just need to turn it over and make sure. The pins have ended up almost exactly on the line I want to stitch on, so they're going to get in my way. So I'm just going to put an extra line of pins a little bit further away to help my fabric. Let's just put one there, maybe one more for luck. Yeah, take that out. So now I can stitch along that line that I drew down the centre of the triangle, and the pins aren't in the way. So again, I'm going to run a little running stitch along this line, and once I've done that I will come back and show you. Right, just come into the end of my line of sewing here. I'm not going to bother sewing across the top here, because I think I might end up enclosing the tape that I hang it from within the layers of each pennant. So I'm just going to leave the top open. Okay, that's that. So I've stitched all the way around. I will end up probably running a little running top stitch along this centre seam as well, just to hold everything in place nicely. And now I'm just going to trim all this excess off, and I'm just going to do a kind of a basting stitch along this centre seam. Once I've got the basics together, I will be adding decorative stitches down the centre line, around here, possibly between these lines of elastic thread. And what I've done the last couple of weeks, I've actually embroidered into the printed fabric just by stitching over the printed design. So I could do that with this, but I think I've done that 2 weeks running. I'll probably give that a rest for now and just leave this fabric as is. So as a decorative stitch to this centre seam, I could just do a little overstitch, an obvious kind of overstitch, a chain stitch, a big running stitch, a blanket stitch, anything goes. Whatever calls to me in the moment, I will do. I like having the basic recipe to get me started, but after that it's a case of whatevs. Whatevs strikes me as a good idea at the moment, at the time. I will do an extra running stitch around the outside of the finished shape as well. I've done that here on this shape. Hopefully you can see that. It's a bit blurry, but I hope you can see. There we go. Right, just coming to the end of this line of running top stitch, which, yeah, it's just tacking everything into place for now. When I come to decorate the finished piece, I will use thicker threads in more contrasting colours or coordinating colours. So at the moment it's quite you can't really see the stitching too much, and I won't worry about taking it out. I normally, with a basting stitch like this, yeah, normally with a basting stitch like this you would take it out, but I just quite like the look of it, so I probably will just leave it there. Okay, so that's the basis of my pennant. I'm going to make this my applique piece. I like the look of that. I'm just going to stick a pin in to hold it in position, and I'm still using the same colour fabric. I'll just tie a knot in this time. No, I'm going to change fabric actually. I'm going to use more of a matching fabric. Thread. I'm going to change the thread this time and use this one, which kind of matches this piece that I'm using. That's all threaded on. Tie a little knot. Bring it up through from the back, and I'm just going to overstitch it. Nothing fancy. Right, just coming to the end now. Stitching my circular applique piece down. This is just done with a spiral of tape or bias binding or something. Just really nice. I think it's a really nice little detail. Okay, so that's my basic shape ready, and I already like how it looks against the others. I will be adding some, once I've finished all of my stitching, I will be adding a backing piece, so none of what I do on here is going to show. I think what I'm going to do is take my little portable slow sewing kit downstairs. I will add some decorative stitching first, then I will add my second piece of backing, and I will stitch them right sides together, turn it inside out, so that I've got a nice perfectly finished triangle for my pennant. All of the back of the stitching will be hidden inside, you'll never see that, and then at that point I'll be ready to add my tassel. So the idea is that the tassel, I've got this little pom-pommy piece that came out of one of the scrap bags. I've got this wooden bead. I'm going to cover the wooden bead in one of these pieces of fabric. I think that one could work, and some thread to make the base of my tassel. And then I'm going to use a mixture of these trims that came in the scrap bags and bits from my orts jar to make the kind of fringy part of my tassel. And then I'll do I think it's called a silk wrap, where you wind the embroidery thread round and round and pull the loop back through. I'll show you how to do that when I come back tomorrow. So yeah, tonight is going to be all about adding the decorative stitching and the backing, and then tomorrow I will come back and show you how I finish it off and make that tassel to go on the bottom. So I'm going to go and do that and just have a bit of a chill on the sofa, and I will see you again in the morning to finish things off.